It was just your typical Seattle day. Light and dark gray clouds intermingling together, sprinkling throughout the day, wind blowing near constantly. I was sitting in mine and Anna's office when the boss came in and dropped 2 huge boxes on my desk, nearly spilling my cup of coffee all over my keyboard. He walked out of the room and left me to the case. I wiped off the few bits of coffee that made it under my suit and sighed. You would think that more boxes would mean an easier case to solve, more evidence easier to find a suspect, right? Well, no. Generally speaking, the more boxes the boss handed to me, the more work I had ahead of me. My partner Anna wouldn't be pleased either. I sighed and sipped my coffee for a few unfortunately short minutes, staring at the boxes in front of me. After much internal bargaining, I stood up and opened the first box and peered inside. It was full of DVDs, journals, crime scene photographs, physical evidence, hair, bits of flesh, nails, blood samples. This already looked like it was going to be one of the more gruesome cases of the year. I looked at the clock and decided to take the boxes home and organize them. I left the office building and walked out into the crisp autumn air. It struck me that not many people were out that evening. It was just after 5. Shouldn't more people be getting off work? I reached my car, put the boxes on top of it, unlocked the door, and piled in. I put the boxes on the passenger seat of my beat-up car and started the drive home. I got home around 5:45, after stopping to get some food for dinner. I made myself tacos and sat down in front of the television. I ate quickly, watched my favorite comedy show, King of the Hill. Figured I would need something funny to get me through those boxes. I emptied the contents out onto the table in front of me. I noticed that there were photos from 3 different crime scenes, so I started by organizing everything by victim number. Why it wasn't in the first place, I wasn't really sure at that point. But as I started going through everything, I had an idea of why. It was all so gruesome. No one would want to deal with this. Maybe that's why me and Anna got the case. We were the best detectives there, after all. Stomachs of steel. Everybody probably assumed that we would be able to cope with it. Looking through it, though, can't say I was exactly sure that we could. It wasn't like we had a choice, though. People were dying, and Anna and I were assigned the case. So we had to end it. After organizing everything by victim, I started on the pile with the earliest dates. I picked up the first of many photographs and gulped as I examined the picture. What was left of the body was mangled, as if someone had been eating it, ripping off pieces of its flesh, tearing it to bits. The body was lying in a bed. The white sheets were soaked with fresh-looking blood. They were ripped in places, like the person had struggled. I couldn't even tell if it was a man or a woman. The body was just too destroyed. I thought it was a woman because of the hair on the head, but everything was too mangled and bloody to really tell. The chest was also torn to pieces. The ribs were broken, sticking out. The heart was missing. 3 fingers were gone, the nose was gone, the eyes were lying on the floor. I could hardly bear to look. Not wanting to look at the pictures anymore, I picked up the journal that they had collected and put it in the box. I opened it and flipped to the last entry. 11/3/2012, 8:50 p.m. I don't know how much longer I can take this. I'm scared all the time, paranoid. Something's always watching me, opening my doors and windows whenever I'm asleep. I'm sure I've developed insomnia. I just can't sleep anymore. Oh, God, someone help me. I'm going insane. Something is going to get me. I just know it. Every day it's the same thing. I can't eat. I can't sleep. My mom told me to go get help, but I don't want help. I want this thing to leave me alone. Oh, God, oh, God, oh, God. I shouldn't have written this now. I'm just even more scared. I remember growing up, I was always scared of what was under the bed, behind the shower curtain, or waiting in bed next to you, waiting for you to roll over. That heaviness that you feel when you so desperately want to look behind you, but you just can't bring yourself to move. None of those were ever as terrifying as this feeling I'm plagued with now. As funny as it sounds, I know I'm going to die. Whoever reads this, you all know what I'm talking about. That overbearing paranoia and fear of your own imagination. When you sit in a dark room, all by yourself. The writing was shaky, and specks of blood covered the page, like it had been opened while she was being murdered. They said they found it on the floor by the bed. I looked through some of the previous entries, a lot of the same. Paranoia, fear, opening doors and windows, feelings of being watched. And I found myself wondering what this thing was. Seattle is thought of as the hippie, coffee-drinking, and pot-smoking city, but considering how relaxed everyone sees us as, there's a lot of crazy shit that happens here. Washington is just serial killer central. And it at least looked like that was what we had on our hands. 3 killings in the same style, bodies torn to shreds, appearing to be eaten. I flipped to the first entry of the journal. 11/1/2012, 11:36 a.m. My window keeps opening. They're closed when I go to sleep, open when I wake up. And maybe it's just an animal, a squirrel or something climbing around in the tree outside my window. I think I'll set up a video camera tonight, try to catch it. If I didn't have to wear these stupid earplugs every night, I could just wake up when it opens. It has a really bad squeak when you open it. If the baby would just stop crying long enough for me to get some sleep without earplugs, then I could find out what's making my window open. Those darn neighbors. The first entry in the journal was only 3 days before the last entry. Things escalated quickly after that, it seemed. All the rest of the entries showed panic and fear. She was terrified after that first night of filming. It was getting hard for me to handle this, even with the canned laughter in the background from King of the Hill. I packed up the boxes, being careful not to look at those damn pictures anymore, and put them aside. I'd just watch some TV for a while, I figured. Take my mind off of everything. I woke up the next morning on the couch. My apartment was cold. I stood up from the couch, sore from a night of awkward sleep. I took a shower, got dressed, and left for the office, calling Anna while I drove. She said that she would be a little late, and that she had just woke up. I stopped at the Starbucks down the street from the office and got us both coffees. We really needed to get through all the contents of the boxes so we could start to think about who this sadistic killer was, or how we could possibly catch him. I took the boxes out of my car after I parked and stacked them on top of the trunk. I put the 2 cups of coffee on top of them and carefully carried them to our office. When I got to the office, it was cold there too. Colder than usual. I turned on the heat and took a sip of my coffee, leaving my suit coat on. Anna arrived 10 minutes later after I did and gratefully took the coffee. "So, what do we have?" she asked. "I don't know if you want to know that," I said, trying to sound lighthearted, but failing, obviously. "Oh, please," she said, chuckling. "We can handle anything." I sighed and opened the boxes for her. I pulled out the pictures from the first crime scene and showed them to her. She visibly gasped as she looked at them. I saw tears welling up in her eyes as she put her hand to her face and grabbed the photo. I had shown her the only picture that I had looked at thoroughly. And from the picture, I could easily understand her disgust. "What kind of sick freak could do this sort of thing to someone?" she said more quietly than usual. "This psychotic nut. He stole her heart. He tore her to shreds. What? Who could do that?" "I don't know, Anna. I was wondering the same things last night," I said. "I only looked at that picture before I couldn't do it anymore. After that, I started reading through the journal the first victim had been keeping." I grabbed that out of the box and opened it to the first entry. I read it to her, and the few from the second day where she was starting to panic. What do you think? Could it be her ex? Whoever she and her ex are? She talks about something standing outside her windows, so maybe he was stalking her? It's possible, Anna replied. But have all 3 of these victims dated the same man? I don't know. We kept going through the boxes. Hours dragged by all too slowly. We read the journals, all with no clues as to who this murderer was. We looked at the pictures, all so grotesque that we could hardly bear to look through them all. Every picture was of a different limb disconnected from the body and sprawled across the room, or of bits of torn-off flesh and splattered blood across the crime scene. The blood and gut-filled images were stained into our minds by the time lunch hour came. I don't know if I'll be able to eat, I said, almost joking, as we walked out of our office to go get lunch, but I knew that I wasn't. Anna laughed a little. I know what you mean. This is probably the worst case that I've dealt with. Over lunch, we discussed theories, whodunit type theories, but none of them really made sense. The ex idea could have been plausible, but what was the likelihood of 2 women and 1 man in a city as big as Seattle dating the same person? Could just be a serial killer, but why was he targeting these young people? Maybe they knew some of the same people, and one of those people just happened to be psychopathic. There were just too many options to narrow it down this early in the investigation. After the last few hours of work, Anna took one box holding one case home, and I took the other 2. I was going to watch the DVDs that they'd found at the crime scene. Lucky me. I got home and made myself some dinner and sat down on the couch. After eating, I popped in the DVD labeled Night 1 and watched. I fell asleep 10 minutes in, though. Woke up the next morning, almost late again. I made my way back to the office as fast as I could and told Anna that I had fallen asleep and didn't manage to get through the whole thing. She said that was okay, that we could watch 1 or 2 of them together. And we situated ourselves around my computer and put in the first disc. Nothing much happened, except the near constant cries of a baby in the distance. We fast-forwarded through the first few hours, but stopped when we saw something strange. Someone, or something, crawled up the tree outside our window and sat there, unmoving. All we could see was a black silhouette of a strange figure. We went to one of the briefing rooms where there was better tape evidence viewing equipment. We hooked everything up and got back to where we were in the tape, and zoomed in as far as we could manage, but we still couldn't make out the figure clearly. It appeared to have something on its wrist as it opened the window. We assumed it was a man based on how huge the hand was. For the whole video, he sat at the window, staring at the woman, just staring. Not moving, not making a sound. It looked like he was mumbling to himself violently, like he was battling with 2 voices in his head, but there was no audio, so there's no way to know if this was true. Near dawn, he jumped out of the tree that he was perched in, startling the woman awake. Anna looked at me in horror when the video ended. I didn't know what to say to her, so I just nodded. I'll take the rest of the tapes and watch them tonight, I said, sparing her sanity. Go home. Take a break. She nodded at me and stood up to leave. I followed her. Even though it was still only lunch hour, I went home, DVDs and soda in hand, to watch the videos before the Christmas party. Definitely not an activity that encouraged holiday spirit, but I didn't really have much of a choice, as I said earlier. I walked into my apartment, dropped the DVDs and soda down on the couch, and went to make a sandwich. When I came back into the living room area, the window was open. I didn't remember opening it. I tried to brush it off as nothing, but after watching the DVD of the first night of filming, I was starting to become paranoid. Maybe this thing would come for me, since I was assigned the goal of capturing him. Maybe he didn't want to be captured and would kill anyone who would try. These thoughts and more ran through my head and made me feel more and more paranoid with every second. I shoved them out of my mind finally and closed the window, making sure to lock it. I ate my sandwich quickly, gulped down some soda to wake me up, and put on the next DVD. It started off the same, except the woman had left a candle lit by the window, probably so she could see who was there. Didn't help me much, though. I could make out what looked like bracelets dangling off of his wrists, clinking whenever he moved. He pressed his hands and face against the locked window. I couldn't make out any eyes, hair, or a human face. All I could see was a nose, which looked broken, and a mouth that looked severely chapped. The whole video progressed the same way that the first had. He stood there till dawn, watching, muttering. I wished I could see what he was, but at the same time, I didn't. Just from his outline, he looked grotesque and monstrous. The second video ended with the creature leaving, just like he had the night before. I remembered reading that on the third day that the woman had called the police. I didn't remember anyone telling me that someone had called, claiming to be being stalked by night or claiming someone was standing outside her windows at night. She also wrote in her journal that she called someone to come stay the night with her. During his interview, we found out that he was her cousin. I know that he found the body. He woke up to screaming in the middle of the night, but claimed that he couldn't open the door in time to save her. He was held as a suspect in custody inside a mental hospital. The incident had caused severe mental damage to him. He refused to discuss the event and only muttered to himself. He was the second victim, the killer had claimed. I turned on all the lights in my apartment, looking paranoid myself. Before I watched the next and last DVD, I opened up the woman's journal again and read through the entries that she had written on her last day. 11/3/2012, 5:17 p.m. I called the police. They won't help me. They don't believe me. They think I'm crazy. I tell them someone with something on its wrists and an ugly face keeps opening my windows and trying to open them if they're locked, but they just don't care. I called Bill and asked him to stay over tonight. I put in the next DVD and prepared for what I was about to see. Though I don't think anyone could successfully prepare themselves for anything like that. What I saw was beyond horrific. It wasn't grotesque, it wasn't horrifying, it wasn't appalling. Because none of those words would suffice in describing the sights I had to sit through that night, watching that damn DVD. It started with her locking the windows and closing her curtains. Her cousin walked into the room and reassured her, rubbing her arm. "I'll be in the next room," he said to her. The woman nodded and he walked away. She lit 2 candles and put one next to her bed and one by the window. We found them on the floor, both labeled Vanilla Honey Stress Relief Candle. The woman curled up under her blankets, facing toward the window. A few hours passed with nothing happening. Even just fast-forwarding through the DVD was suspenseful enough to make my heart race, though. I would fast-forward for a few minutes, press play, and watch for a few seconds just in case the murderer came in. I didn't want to miss it when it happened, even though I did want to miss it. At around 2 a.m. in the tape, I pushed play and went to the bathroom. As I closed the door, I heard a loud crash and ran back out into the living room, my fists raised. I looked around and saw no broken items. I started to hear loud thumps. I went to my door and looked through my peephole, but no one was at the door or my neighbors. My heart was pounding even harder than it was before. I went back into my living room, and the thumping got louder. I looked at my TV screen, and the camera was shaking. I knew this was it. I sat on my knees in front of the TV. My palms were sweaty. My hands were shaking. I felt like I was going to puke, thinking about how she was about to die, and I was the first to witness it. The door opened slowly, eerily, opposite her bed. The man trudged into the room, dragging his feet. The door swings closed behind him without him even touching it. He makes his way to the side of the woman's bed, the side with the candle. The flame flickers as he moves closer and closer to her bed. His steps, loud and slow. Thump, thump, thump. And finally he makes it to her bed. He only looks at the camera for a split second before he turns his back and faces the woman. I'm not sure what I saw, but whatever the fuck it was disgusting. I couldn't make out any eyes. His spine stuck out of its back. His whole body was naked. He was tall. 6'5", probably. The bracelets on his wrists were not bracelets at all, but shackles with broken chains. He had them on his ankles, too. No one mentioned that this was a rape murder. But with this naked man standing beside the woman's bed, what else would I think? As he stood there, I heard him muttering in a low and menacing voice. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but I could hear him this time. An inhuman voice. Something that should have never been witnessed by human ears. He bent over, slowly, eerily, and lifted the woman's hair, inhaling her scent deeply through the strands that came up through his fingers. She started to wake up and rolled over, mumbling, "Bill, what are you doing?" However, when she saw what was waiting for her, she screamed. After less than a few seconds, I heard pounding on the door and Bill yelling, screaming, begging to be let in, asking what was going on. But the door, which wasn't barricaded, would not open. The woman started panicking, struggling to get out from under her blankets, and falls to the floor in the process, with speed that I didn't think this creature or human could possess. He was then on top of the woman, ripping the woman's fragile body into pieces. He ripped and tore bits of skin off and threw them around the room. He was laughing menacingly, getting progressively louder and more joyous as the woman died beneath him. I couldn't see what was going on, but the sheer horror of the situation made my imagination run wild and made the situation even more terrifying for me. Soon the woman stopped struggling, and it was very, very clear that she was far from alive. The creature smiled as he tore her heart out of her broken chest and ate it. I didn't see him do anything to her fingers, but 7 of them were nowhere to be found when the CSI team arrived. The naked creature stood up and walked towards the camera. I could finally see what this thing was as the candlelight shone on his face. He had skin sewn over his eyes, and the rest of him too was just bits of various skin sewn together to create a human-like figure, but nothing on him was even remotely so. His lips were chapped to the point of breaking, and his nose was extremely crooked. He was bald. The blood all over his body made him even more nightmarish. He blew out the candle on the nightstand and laughed, blood spitting out of his mouth. He walked to the window and blew out the second candle, breaking the window and jumping out. All the while, Bill can be heard screaming in the background. I sat in silent horror and began to hear thumping again. Terrified, I walked slowly around my house, searching for the source, but I found nothing. And the last room I checked was my bathroom. I opened my shower curtain, and just as I did so, the bathroom light exploded, nearly giving me a heart attack. Okay, I said to myself. I need a break. Just gonna go to the Christmas party now. Take my mind off this. As I walked out the door, I thought of what this creature would be called. And I came up with a name in that moment. Stitch. And little did I know the horrors that awaited me in the weeks to come.